My name is Lila Moore, and I am 29 years old. 3 months ago, on what would have been my grandmother's 85th birthday, I checked my lottery ticket and discovered I had won $62 million. My hands trembled as I stared at those 6 numbers that matched perfectly. But after the initial shock wore off, I made a decision that would change everything. I would tell absolutely no one about this money. Not yet. You see, I have a complicated history with my family when it comes to money and loyalty. If you are watching this right now, drop a comment with your country's flag emoji so I can see where this story reaches. Before I tell you about the test that revealed who my real family is, hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real stories about hidden wealth and family betrayal that might just change how you view your own relationships. Before that life-changing Tuesday in March, my existence was beautifully ordinary in some ways, painfully limiting in others. I worked as a veterinary technician at Northwest Animal Emergency Clinic in Seattle, earning just enough to scrape by while doing work that filled my soul. Every day, I witnessed the incredible bond between people and their animals, and every day, I saw heartbreak when families could not afford necessary treatment. My apartment was a tiny studio above Grind Coffee on Capitol Hill, nothing glamorous, but it had a small window where I could watch the sunrise each morning. The space was barely 400 square feet, with a Murphy bed I folded down each night and a kitchen so small I could touch both walls simultaneously. But it was mine, and more importantly, it was affordable enough that I could continue my secret mission. You see, for the past 2 years, I had been anonymously helping pet owners who could not afford veterinary care. Every month, I took 15% of my paycheck, sometimes more, and created fake payment plans or scholarship funds to cover treatments for animals whose families were struggling financially. My co-workers thought these mysterious payments came from some wealthy benefactor, and I let them believe it. In reality, it meant I lived on ramen and rice, wore thrift store clothes, and had not taken a vacation in 4 years. My daily routine was structured around this hidden generosity. I would wake at 5 a.m. in my cramped space, make instant coffee because I could not afford the shop downstairs regularly, and begin my day carrying the weight of others' struggles alongside my own. The clinic work was demanding, with 12-hour shifts becoming normal during busy periods, especially in winter when pets faced more health crises. I loved the work, but the emotional toll of seeing animals suffer due to financial constraints was overwhelming. My family situation was a maze of remarriages, resentments, and financial entanglements that had shaped my entire adult life. My parents, Marcus and Vivienne Moore, divorced when I was 16, and both remarried within 18 months, creating a complicated web of step relationships and divided loyalties. My father, Marcus, a high school biology teacher, married Bambi Knox, a yoga instructor 15 years younger than him with expensive wellness habits and a social media presence that required constant funding. My mother, Vivienne, found security with Roland Sterling, a tech executive who made excellent money but viewed every expense through a spreadsheet lens, treating family finances like corporate budgets. I have 2 siblings who could not be more different from each other or from me. My twin sister, Skylar, graduated from medical school and married Dr. Donovan Davidson, a plastic surgeon. They live in a $2 million house in Bellevue, complete with a pool, 3-car garage, and a nanny for their twin boys. Skylar had always been the achiever, the one who made our parents proud, the golden child who seemed to navigate life effortlessly. Then there is my older brother, Kieran, 32, who despite his intelligence and charm has spent his adult life chasing get-rich-quick schemes and startup dreams that never materialized. He bounces between cities, careers, and relationships, leaving a trail of borrowed money and broken promises. The pattern was always identical: passionate pitch about his latest venture, desperate need for startup capital, tearful promises of repayment, then radio silence until his next big idea required funding. My extended family added additional layers of complexity to an already tangled situation. My Aunt Prudence, my father's younger sister, was perhaps the most genuine person in our entire family tree. Despite working as a retired librarian living on a modest pension, she somehow always found ways to show up when people truly needed her. She drove a 20-year-old Toyota that made concerning sounds, lived in a small apartment filled with rescued books from library sales, and never complained about her circumstances. In stark contrast was my Uncle Blaine, my mother's older brother, who had built a successful investment firm and never let anyone forget his financial acumen. He spent family gatherings analyzing everyone's life choices like poorly performing stocks, offering unsolicited advice about career moves and fiscal responsibility. His wife had left him years ago, taking half his assets, but he maintained his superior attitude about money management. My cousin Jasper, Uncle Blaine's son, had inherited his father's sense of entitlement but none of his business skills. At 26, he had already burned through most of his trust fund supporting a cocaine habit that the family pretended not to notice. He lived in a downtown loft paid for by his father while claiming to be an artist, though no one had ever seen his actual work. My financial history with this family had left deep scars and hard-learned lessons. When Kieran needed $4,000 to launch his organic dog food company 2 years ago, I depleted my savings account to help him, only to discover months later that he had spent most of it on a vintage motorcycle instead. When Skylar needed help with a down payment for her first house, I put $3,000 on my credit card that she promised to repay after her medical residency ended. 3 years later, I was still making minimum payments on that debt. When my father needed money to repair damage to his classroom after a break-in, I sent what I could, only to see social media posts of him and Bambi at an expensive meditation retreat in Costa Rica the following month. When Uncle Blaine's investment firm had temporary cash flow problems, I loaned him $1,500 from my emergency fund. He repaid it eventually but never acknowledged the irony of needing financial help from the family member whose money management he constantly criticized. The only person who knew the full extent of these betrayals was my best friend Raven Mitchell. We had met during our veterinary technician training program, and unlike most relationships in my life, ours had remained constant and reciprocal. Raven worked as an emergency room nurse, understood both struggle and sacrifice, and never judged my complicated feelings about family loyalty. She was my voice of reason when I felt myself becoming bitter, reminding me that not everyone was calculated in their kindness. At work, the dynamics were no less challenging. My supervisor, Dr. Cornelia Thorne, had a habit of taking credit for my innovative treatment suggestions during medical conferences. My colleague, Felix Hart, consistently left early claiming personal emergencies, leaving me to handle the most difficult cases alone, yet somehow always managed to receive recognition for the department's success. Despite being undervalued, I maintained my dedication to the animals and continued working overtime without complaint, hoping someday my efforts would be acknowledged. Buying lottery tickets was my grandmother Eleanor's tradition that I had inherited after her death 2 years ago. Every Tuesday, I would stop at Pike Place Market and spend $10 on tickets, using numbers that connected me to her memory. My family found this ritual amusing and slightly pathetic. My mother called it mathematical illiteracy. My brother joked that I should just burn the money for faster results. My father lectured me about probability theory and the lottery being designed to exploit hope. But there was something spiritually significant about those tickets, a connection to my grandmother who had raised me every summer until her death, filling my childhood with stories about resilience and kindness. She had lived through the Great Depression, worked multiple jobs to support her family, and somehow maintained an optimistic view of human nature despite experiencing her share of disappointment. I had dreams that seemed increasingly unrealistic as I approached 30, still paying off veterinary school loans and carrying credit card debt from helping family members. I wanted to travel, to see the wildlife conservation projects I read about online. I wanted to expand my animal charity work beyond my limited monthly contributions. I wanted to buy a small house where I could foster rescue animals without worrying about landlord restrictions. Most of all, I wanted financial security that would allow me to help others without jeopardizing my own survival. Each month was a careful calculation of bills, groceries, and the occasional coffee with Raven. I shopped at discount stores, bought generic brands, and knew exactly which gas station had the lowest prices. I drove my 12-year-old Honda Civic despite the transmission making ominous noises, because replacing it was financially impossible. I had perfected the art of appearing financially stable while constantly calculating costs, declining social invitations I could not afford, and making excuses to avoid activities that required spending money. This was my reality before 6 numbers changed everything. The day I bought the winning ticket was March 15th, my grandmother Eleanor's birthday. I had just finished an emotionally draining week at the clinic where Dr. Thorne had once again presented my treatment protocol for senior animals as her own innovation at a veterinary conference. I felt invisible and undervalued, questioning whether my dedication to helping animals was worth the financial struggle. I stopped at Pike Place Market as I did every Tuesday, but this time feeling particularly connected to my grandmother's memory. The vendor, Mrs. Chen, had known Eleanor personally and always smiled when she saw me approach. "Tuesday tickets for Eleanor's granddaughter," she said warmly, preparing my usual selection. "Actually," I said on impulse, "let me choose my own numbers today. It is her birthday." Instead of quick picks, I selected numbers that held deep meaning: Eleanor's birth month and day, 3 and 15, the day she died, 8, the number of summers the first spent with her, 12, my father's birthday, 21, and finally 30, representing my hope for financial freedom by age 30. That evening, I prepared a simple dinner in my tiny kitchen and opened a bottle of wine Raven had given me for my recent birthday. The lottery drawing was at 8 p.m., but I barely paid attention while video chatting with Raven about our upcoming weekend volunteer work at the animal shelter. At 8:30, I casually picked up my phone to check the numbers, expecting nothing as always. The first number appeared, 3. I felt a small flutter of recognition. The second, 15. My heart rate increased slightly. Third number, 8, fourth, 12. By now, my palms were damp with perspiration. Fifth number, 21. I held my breath, afraid to hope. Sixth and final number, 30. I stared at my phone screen for what felt like an eternity, certain I had misread something. This could not be happening. I refreshed the page multiple times, checked different lottery websites, even called the official number to hear the winning numbers repeated by an automated voice. According to every source, I was the sole winner of $62 million. After taxes, I would receive approximately $38 million, an amount so large I could not even conceptualize it. Someone who had been excited earlier that week about finding a $5 coupon for dog food was now worth more than most people earn in several lifetimes. Sleep was impossible that night. Instead, I spent hours researching lottery winners online, discovering disturbing patterns of destroyed relationships and ruined lives. Article after article described winners whose families fell apart due to greed, friends who disappeared when the money was gone, and previously loving relatives who became aggressive and demanding. One particularly haunting article profiled a winner whose brother had sued him for half the jackpot, claiming they had always shared everything. Another described a woman whose adult children had her declared mentally incompetent when she refused to give them immediate access to her winnings. The stories painted money not as a blessing, but as a relationship destroyer, a magnifier of the worst human characteristics. As dawn approached, I made my decision. I would claim the money quietly and tell no one until I understood who in my family could be trusted with this information. I needed time to process this windfall, to create a plan, to understand what this money meant for my life before everyone else tried to control it. That morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 2 years and made an emergency appointment with Harrison Blackwood, an attorney specializing in estate planning and lottery winners. His office occupied the 40th floor of a downtown skyscraper, and as I sat in the marble-accented waiting room wearing my thrift store clothes, clutching my purse containing the winning ticket, I felt like an intruder in a world I did not belong to. "Miss Moore," Harrison greeted me, extending a perfectly manicured hand. He appeared to be in his 50s, with distinguished grey hair and sharp eyes behind designer glasses. "What brings you to my office today?" I took a shaky breath and placed the lottery ticket on his mahogany desk. "I need to understand how to claim this without anyone discovering my identity." His eyebrows rose briefly as he examined the ticket through a magnifying glass. Then he nodded with professional composure. "I see. You have definitely come to the correct place for this situation." Over the next 3 hours, Harrison explained the intricacies of anonymous lottery claiming. In Washington state, winners could establish blind trusts or legal entities that would protect their identities indefinitely. He outlined the process of creating a trust, managing tax implications, and assembling a team of financial advisors qualified to handle such substantial wealth. "The biggest mistake lottery winners make," he told me, leaning forward seriously, "is telling too many people too quickly. Once that information spreads, there is absolutely no way to control it or take it back. I nodded vigorously, relieved that my instinctive caution had been correct. I want to handle this responsibly. I do not want this money to destroy my relationships or my life. As I left Harrison's office with folders full of legal documents and a detailed list of next steps, I felt a strange combination of exhilaration and dread. I possessed more money than I had ever imagined possible, yet I could not share this life-altering news with anyone I loved. I would be living a complete double life, pretending to be the same struggling veterinary technician while secretly being worth tens of millions. Over the following 3 weeks, I worked closely with Harrison to establish the Evergreen Legacy Trust, claim my winnings through this entity, and create sophisticated investment accounts. We developed a comprehensive financial plan ensuring I would never experience money anxiety again, even if I lived to 100. The money became real, sitting in accounts under my complete control, earning more in daily interest than I had previously made in months. Yet my day-to-day existence remained unchanged. I continued reporting to the clinic, complaining about bills with co-workers, driving my ancient Honda with its concerning transmission noises. The secrecy began weighing heavily on my conscience. I found myself observing my family differently, wondering about their motivations, questioning whether their affection was genuine or transactional. Gradually, an idea crystallized that would answer these questions definitively. What if I could test my family's loyalty without revealing my windfall? What if I created a situation where I needed help, allowing me to see who would support me without any prospect of personal gain? The plan formed slowly, carefully. I would fabricate a financial crisis significant enough to require substantial help but believable given my known circumstances. I would approach each family member individually with identical stories and requests, then observe their responses when helping me offered no benefit to them. After another meeting with Harrison to ensure my assets were completely secured, I felt ready to proceed. We had established diverse investment portfolios, created charitable foundation frameworks, and set up modest personal accounts that would allow me to access funds without raising suspicion about lifestyle changes. Everything is properly protected, Lila, Harrison assured me, sliding a summary folder across his polished desk. Your financial future is completely secure. You could stop working immediately if you desired. The temptation was enormous, but I knew sudden lifestyle changes would prompt questions I was not prepared to answer. I think I will maintain my position at the clinic for now, I replied. At least until I understand some things about my family. That evening, I invited Raven over for dinner. As we sat on my fire escape with glasses of cheap wine, watching the city lights flicker below, I decided to share part of my plan. I could not keep everything bottled up completely, and I trusted her more than anyone in the world. I am thinking about conducting an experiment with my family, I began cautiously. Raven raised an eyebrow, setting down her wine. What kind of experiment? I took a deep breath. I am going to tell them the clinic is closing due to financial scandal, and I need money to survive while job searching. Just to see who actually cares enough to help when I need it. Raven's expression shifted from curiosity to deep concern. Lila, that sounds manipulative and potentially destructive. Why would you do something like that? Because I am exhausted from being the only person who helps when others need it, I said, avoiding her direct gaze. I want to discover who would be there for me if our situations were reversed. But creating false emergencies to test people, that does not sound like the person I know, Raven protested. Why not simply have honest conversations about how you feel? I laughed bitterly. Right, because my family excels at honest emotional communication. You have witnessed how they treat me, Raven. You know their patterns. Still, this approach feels wrong and potentially harmful. What exactly are you trying to prove? I am not trying to prove anything, I insisted, though that was not entirely truthful. I simply want to understand who genuinely cares about me versus who views me as a convenient resource. Raven shook her head sadly. I think this experiment might hurt you more than anyone else, but I recognize that determined look in your eyes. You have already decided to proceed. She was absolutely right. I had spent days crafting my story, ensuring it was believable but not so dramatic that it would raise immediate suspicion. I would tell everyone that Northwest Animal Emergency Clinic was suddenly closing after the owners were caught embezzling funds designated for equipment and medications. I would explain that I needed $8,000 to cover rent, student loan payments, and basic living expenses until I could secure new employment. $8,000 was substantial but not unreasonable, certainly within the financial means of most family members. More importantly, it was enough to represent a genuine sacrifice for anyone who helped, making their response meaningful rather than trivial. I created a detailed list of everyone I would approach: my mother Vivienne and stepfather Roland, my father Marcus and stepmother Bambi, my sister Skylar and her husband Donovan, my brother Kieran, my aunt Prudence, my uncle Blaine, and my cousin Jasper. 10 people, all of whom had requested my assistance at various points, all of whom I had supported financially or emotionally when they faced difficulties. The following day, I practiced my story with Raven, who reluctantly agreed to help despite her moral reservations about the entire plan. "You need to sound genuinely distressed but not desperately panicked," she advised clinically. "And prepare specific details about the clinic closing. They will definitely ask probing questions." I nodded, taking careful notes. "I will explain that the veterinarians discovered the embezzlement when equipment payments bounced, and now the clinic is under federal investigation. That explains the sudden closure and why final paychecks might be delayed indefinitely. And your job search strategy? They will inquire about your next steps. I have been applying at every veterinary clinic in the Seattle area, but most positions require experience with specific equipment we did not have at our clinic. I have several interviews scheduled, but nothing definite, and my emergency fund was depleted by recent car repairs and medical tests. I had considered every possible detail, creating a scenario designed to elicit sympathy without raising skeptical questions about timing or plausibility. As I finalized preparations, guilt gnawed at my conscience. Was Raven correct about this being manipulative and wrong? But then I remembered emptying my savings to help Kieran's failed business ventures, remembered putting Skylar's house down payment on my credit card, remembered sending money to my father while struggling to afford my own necessities. My resolve solidified. This was not merely about testing them, it was about understanding who deserved access to my transformed life. I made predictions about each person's likely response, based on years of observing their behavior patterns. My mother would probably express concern and offer minimal help while suggesting I ask someone else. My father would deliver lectures about financial responsibility while providing little actual assistance. Skylar would claim her family expenses prevented substantial help. Kieran would definitely claim poverty despite his expensive lifestyle choices. Roland and Bambi would refuse outright, viewing my problems as outside their responsibility. Uncle Blaine would judge my career choices while offering condescending advice instead of money. Cousin Jasper would promise help that would never materialize, possibly while asking for assistance with his own problems. The only person I held genuine hope for was Aunt Prudence. Despite having the least to give financially, she had always demonstrated the most generosity with whatever resources she possessed. Still, I tried maintaining realistic expectations. $8,000 represented a significant percentage of her annual income as a retired librarian living alone. My strategy was set. Over the next 10 days, I would contact each family member individually, present identical stories, and observe who stepped forward when helping offered no personal advantage. Only then would I decide who deserved to know about my lottery victory. Only then would I understand who truly valued me beyond my utility to them. With a mixture of anticipation and dread, I picked up my phone to make the first call. It was time to discover who my real family was. I decided to contact my mother first. Vivienne had always presented herself as a nurturing parent, frequently reminding her children about the sacrifices she had made for our well-being. If anyone would offer assistance, I believed it would be her. My hands shook slightly as I dialed her number. She answered after the 4th ring, sounding distracted by background television noise. "Hi, Mom," I said, intentionally making my voice sound strained and weary. "Lila, is everything all right? You sound upset about something." I launched into my carefully prepared story, explaining about the clinic's sudden closure, the embezzlement scandal, and my precarious financial situation. As I spoke, I could hear her breathing change, becoming more concerned with each detail I provided. "Oh honey, that is absolutely terrible," she said when I finished. "Have you filed for unemployment benefits? What about your emergency savings account?" I explained that unemployment processing would take several weeks and that my emergency fund had been depleted by recent car repairs and medical tests for some concerning symptoms I had discovered. I deliberately avoided specifying the nature of these symptoms, allowing her imagination to fill the concerning blanks. "I hate asking this, Mom, but I desperately need help. About $8,000 to cover rent, student loans, and basic expenses until I can find new employment. I promise I will repay you as soon as I am financially stable again." A long, uncomfortable pause stretched between us. I could almost hear her mental calculations. "Oh, Lila, you know Roland and I just made that substantial down payment on the lake house property. We are extremely cash poor right now." Her voice adopted a slightly defensive tone. "Have you considered asking your father? Or maybe Skylar? Donovan makes excellent money at his practice." I was hoping to avoid asking Dad, I said truthfully, and Skylar has the twins and their expensive private school tuition. "Well, let me discuss this with Roland and see what we might be able to manage," she said finally. "But I cannot make any promises. You understand how careful he is with money, especially regarding situations involving, well, you know how he feels about financial assistance." I did know. Roland had never considered my welfare his responsibility, making it explicitly clear from the beginning that his income was designated for my mother and any children they might have together. They never had children. "Of course, Mom. Just please let me know as soon as possible. My rent is due next week, and I am genuinely worried." "I will, sweetheart, and I am truly sorry about your employment situation. These challenges always work out for the best eventually. Maybe this is the universe telling you to pursue something more financially stable than animal care." After ending the call, I recorded her response in a journal I had started specifically for this experiment. She had expressed surface-level concern but immediately sought ways to redirect responsibility to other family members. She had not refused outright, but I suspected her conversation with Roland would conveniently result in their inability to help. The next day, I arranged to meet my father, Marcus, for coffee. I selected a public cafe, thinking he might moderate his response in such a setting. "You look exhausted," he observed as his greeting when I sat across from him. I gave him a weak smile and began my story. His expression remained stoic as I spoke, occasionally nodding or frowning at specific details. When I concluded by requesting $8,000 in assistance, he leaned back and crossed his arms defensively. "Lila, I have always emphasized the importance of financial responsibility and planning," he began, slipping into his familiar teacher voice. "This situation perfectly illustrates why I told you to maintain 6 months of living expenses in emergency savings at all times. What happened to that financial cushion?" "Life happened, Dad," I replied, struggling to keep frustration from my voice. "Medical bills, car repairs, helping other family members when they needed it. Not everyone can afford to set aside that much money while earning what I earn." He sighed heavily, as if my explanation confirmed his worst expectations. "And now you expect others to rescue you from poor planning. What about your spending habits? Do you really need that expensive apartment in that trendy neighborhood? What about your cable subscription and those streaming services I see you posting about?" For the next 25 minutes, he delivered a comprehensive lecture about financial planning, job market strategy, and the importance of living below one's means. Not once during this monologue did he offer any actual assistance or acknowledge that I might have valid reasons for my current situation. "I would love to help you, Lila, but Bambi and I are focused entirely on our retirement planning right now. We cannot afford to compromise those investments. It would be financially irresponsible for us to jeopardize our future security." He patted my hand in a patronizing manner. "This will serve as a valuable learning experience. Sometimes people need to face serious consequences before making necessary life changes." I nodded, fighting tears that were only partially performative. Even expecting this response based on past experience, it was painful to hear him dismiss my needs so casually while lecturing me about responsibility. My sister Skylar was my next target. I drove to her impressive suburban house on a Saturday afternoon when her husband was playing golf, ensuring we would have privacy for our conversation. "Lila, what a wonderful surprise," she exclaimed when she opened her massive front door. "The twins are at their swimming lessons. Please come in and make yourself comfortable." Her house was magazine perfect, featuring expensive furniture, professional family photographs, and artwork that probably cost more than I earned in 6 months. As we sat in her gourmet kitchen sipping lattes from her commercial-grade espresso machine, I told her about my fabricated situation. "Oh my God, that is absolutely horrible," she gasped dramatically, reaching across the granite island to squeeze my hand. "I cannot believe they would just shut down like that with no warning. How are you managing emotionally?" Her sympathy seemed genuine, and for a moment I felt hopeful about her response. Then I mentioned needing to borrow $8,000. "Oh," she said, her entire demeanor shifting subtly. "Well, this timing is actually quite challenging for us financially. We just purchased Donovan's new Audi last month, and the twins' private school tuition was due. Plus, we are completely renovating the master bathroom suite." She glanced around nervously, as if the expensive renovations were evidence of their financial constraints. "Donovan handles most of our major financial decisions, and he maintains very strict budgets for unexpected expenses." "I understand," I said quietly. "I would not ask if the situation was not desperate." I know," she said quickly, avoiding eye contact. "Let me discuss this with Donovan and see what we might be able to do. Maybe we could help with a smaller amount. Or perhaps you could stay in our guest suite temporarily until you find new employment." I thanked her for the offer but explained that relocating would complicate my job search, which was centered in the city. She promised to call after speaking with her husband, but her body language and tone told me everything I needed to know about the outcome. My brother Kieran provided perhaps the most disappointing response. After sending him a detailed text message explaining my situation and specifically requesting his help, he responded hours later with a brief message: "That really sucks, sis. Super tight financially myself right now. We'll call you later to discuss." He never called. My follow-up messages went unanswered for days. When I attempted calling him directly, the calls immediately went to voicemail. This response came from the same brother who had borrowed thousands from me over the years, always accompanied by emotional appeals and solemn promises of repayment that never materialized. My stepmother Bambi was refreshingly direct when I called her, not bothering with pretense or false sympathy. "Lila, I am sure this situation is difficult, but Marcus and I are not in a position to provide financial assistance. Perhaps this crisis represents an opportunity for you to develop better money management skills and career planning." When I reminded her that I had helped them with repairs to their mountain cabin the previous year, she became defensive. "That was completely different. That was a family property that you also benefit from using." The fact that I had been invited to use the cabin exactly once in 4 years apparently did not factor into her reasoning. My stepfather Roland was even more blunt in his rejection. "You are not my biological daughter," he stated plainly when I called. "I have financially supported your mother for years, but your monetary problems are your personal responsibility. Perhaps you should have selected a more lucrative career path initially." My cousin Jasper initially seemed sympathetic and eager to help. He promised to definitely come through for me and suggested meeting for lunch so he could give me a check. But when the scheduled day arrived, he texted an hour beforehand claiming something urgent had come up and promising to reschedule soon. He never did, and eventually stopped responding to my messages entirely. Uncle Blaine's response was predictable but still painful to experience. "Well, Lila, I always said that veterinary clinic seemed financially unstable. I told your father years ago that you should have taken that position at the corporate bank after college, but nobody in this family listens to practical advice." He then spent 30 minutes detailing the financial troubles other family members had experienced and how they had overcome their challenges without seeking handouts from relatives. By that evening, I discovered through Skylar that Uncle Blaine was telling everyone about my financial irresponsibility and poor life choices. After 8 days of rejections, conditional offers that never materialized, and outright silence from people I had helped repeatedly over the years, I was emotionally depleted. The experiment had confirmed my worst suspicions about family loyalty, but experiencing the reality was still deeply painful. 7 people who had asked for and received my financial assistance multiple times could not or would not reciprocate when I faced crisis. The pattern was consistent: immediate expressions of sympathy followed by elaborate explanations about why helping was impossible, often accompanied by suggestions that I ask someone else. Then my phone rang unexpectedly. The caller ID showed Aunt Prudence. "Lila, sweetheart, I just heard from your mother about the clinic situation. Are you holding up all right?" Her voice carried genuine warmth and concern. I had not actually contacted Prudence yet, planning to call her the following day. The fact that she had reached out first after hearing about my troubles through family gossip spoke volumes about her character. "I am managing day by day," I said, the emotion in my voice now completely authentic. "Listen carefully. I want to help you through this difficult time. Can we meet for lunch tomorrow?" My treat, naturally. The next day, we met at a small bookstore cafe near the library where she had worked for 30 years. Prudence looked exactly as she always did, silver-streaked hair pulled into a practical ponytail, wearing comfortable jeans and a hand-knitted cardigan with slightly mismatched buttons that somehow looked perfect on her. She embraced me tightly before we sat down. "I am so sorry about your job, sweetheart. That clinic never deserved someone with your dedication and skills." As we ate simple sandwiches and soup, she asked thoughtful questions about my job search prospects and offered to contact former colleagues who had connections in the veterinary community. She listened without judgment, offering emotional support alongside practical suggestions. Then, after our plates had been cleared away, she reached into her worn canvas purse and pulled out a plain white envelope. "I want you to take this," she said, sliding it across the small table. "It contains $5,000. I know it is not the complete amount you mentioned needing, but it should cover your rent and some expenses while you transition." I stared at the envelope in complete shock. "Prudence, I cannot accept this. This is far too much money. Absolutely nonsense. Family helps family when it truly matters." She reached across the table and grasped my hand firmly. "And I want you to know something else important. If you need a place to live temporarily to reduce your rent burden, my sofa converts into a quite comfortable bed. The apartment is not fancy, but you are welcome to stay as long as necessary." Tears filled my eyes, and this time they were completely genuine and overwhelming. "Thank you," I whispered, unable to say more without breaking down entirely. "Now, do not worry about repaying this immediately," she continued softly. "Focus on getting back on your feet first. Find employment somewhere that actually appreciates your talents this time. Life is far too short to work for people who do not value what you bring." As we prepared to leave the cafe, Prudence hugged me again, holding on longer than usual. "You are going to be perfectly fine, Lila. You are intelligent, capable, and kind. This is just a temporary setback, not a permanent situation." Driving home, I clutched the envelope containing $5,000, money I suspected Prudence could not comfortably spare. The contrast between her response and my immediate family's reactions could not have been more dramatic or revealing. That evening, I conducted research that left me stunned and heartbroken. According to public records and social media posts, $5,000 represented nearly all of Prudence's savings account. Additionally, I discovered that she had been quietly managing complications from diabetes and hypertension. Her medication costs had increased substantially recently, and she had been taking on private tutoring work to supplement her modest pension. The knowledge hit me with physical force. Prudence, who possessed the least financial resources of anyone in the family, had given me almost everything she had without hesitation, conditions, or lectures. Meanwhile, my mother, who had recently spent $12,000 on lake house furniture, could not spare $8,000 to help her daughter with rent and medical expenses. The next day, I invited Prudence to my apartment for dinner. As she settled onto my second-hand couch, I noticed for the first time how fragile she appeared, the fine lines around her eyes deeper than I remembered, her movements more careful and deliberate. "Prudence, there is something important I need to tell you," I began, setting a mug of tea in front of her. "I have not been completely honest about my situation." Her expression remained open and curious rather than defensive or concerned. "What is it, honey? I did not lose my job. The clinic is operating normally. I still have my position there." The words rushed out quickly. I fabricated the entire story to see who in our family would actually help me when I needed it. Prudence was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly with understanding rather than anger. "I see. And what did you learn from this experiment? Are you upset with me?" I asked, suddenly terrified of losing the one genuine relationship I had discovered. She considered the question carefully. "No, not angry. Sad, perhaps. Sad that you felt you needed to test people in this way." She sipped her tea thoughtfully. "But I understand why you did it. Our family has not always treated you with the kindness you deserve. You were the only one who offered genuine help," I told her. "Everyone else had elaborate excuses or simply ignored me completely." Prudence sighed deeply. People reveal their true character when giving becomes inconvenient or costly. I learned that lesson the hard way myself many years ago. "What do you mean?" She set down her mug and folded her hands in her lap. "My ex-husband, Theodore. Did I ever tell you the real reason we divorced?" I shook my head. The family story had always been vague, something about growing apart and wanting different things. I received a modest inheritance when my mother died. About $75,000, not a fortune, but significant for us at that time in our lives. Theodore immediately developed elaborate plans for the money, primarily investing in his friend's various business ventures. She smiled ruefully. "I wanted to save it for our future together, maybe purchase a small house eventually, start a family." "What happened to the money?" "One day, I discovered Theodore had forged my signature and withdrawn most of it. By the time I found out, it was gone, invested in a restaurant that failed within 8 months. She shook her head at the painful memory. When I confronted him about the theft, do you know what he said? That it was our money, not just mine, and he had as much right to it as I did. As if my name on the inheritance documents meant absolutely nothing. I was shocked. I had no idea any of this happened. The family preferred the growing apart narrative. Less complicated, less uncomfortable. She reached for my hand. "The point is, I learned that some people view you as a resource rather than a person, and it is always a painful but necessary lesson. I am so sorry you experienced that betrayal," I said, squeezing her weathered hand. "It was decades ago, but it taught me something crucial about money and relationships." She looked at me intently. "Money does not just reveal who others truly are, Lila. It reveals who we become as well. How we use it, how we share it, how we think about it. Wealth is a powerful mirror reflecting our deepest values." Her words resonated profoundly. In that moment, I made a decision that would change both our lives forever. "Prudence, there is something else I must tell you. Something extraordinary that happened 3 months ago." I took a deep breath. "I won the lottery. The jackpot was $62 million. Her eyes widened with astonishment, but she remained silent, waiting patiently for me to continue. "I have not told anyone else. Not my parents, not Skylar or Kieran, not even Raven. You are the first and only person who knows." "Oh, Lila," she breathed softly. "That is absolutely life-changing. How are you processing something so enormous?" "That is exactly why I conducted this test," I explained. "I needed to understand who would support me without knowing about the money. I needed to see who valued me as a person rather than as a potential source of financial benefit." Prudence nodded slowly, processing the implications. "I understand that completely. But what will you do now with this knowledge?" "That is what I am trying to determine. The money is secure with excellent financial advisors. But I do not know how to handle family relationships moving forward." Prudence considered this carefully. "You know you do not owe anyone anything, Lila. Not even me. This is your life and your choice. But I want to help you," I insisted firmly. "Your medical expenses, a better living situation, whatever you need to be comfortable and secure." She smiled gently, the same expression she had worn when reading bedtime stories during my childhood visits. "I do not need anything from you, sweetheart. I am genuinely happy with my life as it is. My apartment is small, but it contains everything I love. My car runs reliably most days. I have my former students who still visit, my books, my volunteer work, and now this wonderful secret shared with my favorite niece. She squeezed my hand. Just knowing you are financially secure and will be happy is sufficient for me. Her selflessness brought fresh tears to my eyes. Here was someone who had given me nearly everything she possessed when she believed I needed it, and now was requesting nothing in return despite knowing I had millions to share. As we continued talking late into the night, the contrast between Prudence and the rest of my family became even more stark and undeniable. While I had been conducting my experiment, word about my supposed financial troubles had spread throughout the extended family network. Instead of prompting additional concern or support, it had mainly generated gossip, judgment, and speculation about my character. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Heard from Skylar that you asked her for money too. You should have mentioned you were approaching everyone. This feels like you are manipulating us against each other. Another message came from my father. Bambi tells me you have been calling everyone requesting handouts. This is exactly the kind of irresponsible financial behavior I have always warned you about. The family had transformed my request for help during crisis into evidence of my character flaws rather than an opportunity to demonstrate compassion. In doing so, they had revealed everything I needed to understand about the true nature of our relationships. The morning after my confession to Prudence, I met with Harrison to discuss long-term financial strategies and philanthropic planning. Now that I had clarity about family dynamics, I could make informed decisions about my future without illusion or false hope. I want to establish a trust for my Aunt Prudence, I told him directly. Something that will cover her medical expenses and provide comfortable retirement income, structured in a way that feels like a gift rather than charity. She is extremely proud and independent. Harrison nodded, making detailed notes. We can create a family trust that provides monthly distributions. She would not need to manage large sums all at once, which can be overwhelming for people unaccustomed to substantial wealth. Perfect. And I want to purchase a small house near wherever I decide to relocate. Nothing extravagant, just comfortable and accessible for someone managing health issues. We spent the following 2 hours discussing investment strategies, charitable foundation structures, and my evolving career plans. I had decided to leave my veterinary technician position and establish a non-profit organization focused on providing medical care for pets whose owners could not afford treatment, inspired by my years of secret assistance and the countless animals I had seen suffer due to financial constraints. What about the rest of your family? Harrison asked diplomatically. Do you plan to reveal your lottery win to them? I shook my head firmly. Not currently. Maybe not ever. But I do want to arrange a family gathering to address the financial assistance situation and clear the air about recent events. Later that day, I called Raven and finally revealed the complete truth about everything: the lottery win, the family loyalty test, and the devastating but clarifying results. After her initial shock subsided, she understood why I had maintained the secrecy. So what happens next? She asked. Are you going to become one of those eccentric millionaires who still clips coupons and drives beat-up cars? I laughed for the first time in weeks. No, but I am not planning to suddenly start purchasing Lamborghinis either. I want this money to create meaningful impact, starting with helping Prudence and expanding my animal charity work. Raven agreed enthusiastically. And what about the family members who failed your test? I am still processing that. I have called a family meeting for this weekend. I told everyone I have an important announcement to make. When Sunday arrived, I was surprised that everyone actually showed up at my tiny apartment. My mother and Roland, my father and Bambi, Skylar and Donovan, even Kieran, who had been avoiding my calls for 2 weeks. Uncle Blaine arrived with his usual disapproving expression. Cousin Jasper came looking slightly disheveled. Aunt Prudence arrived last, giving me a secret, knowing smile as she entered. As everyone crowded into my small living room, looking around with varying degrees of curiosity and barely concealed judgment about my modest living situation, I stood before them feeling strangely calm and powerful. Thank you all for coming today, I began. I know there have been rumors circulating about my financial situation, and I wanted to address them directly with everyone present. My mother shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Jason became suddenly fascinated with his smartphone. Skylar and Donovan exchanged meaningful glances. The tension in the room was palpable. The truth is, I am completely fine financially. I have accepted a new position with significantly better compensation and benefits. This was technically accurate since I had appointed myself executive director of my planned foundation with a modest but adequate salary. I will be transitioning to this role next month. Well, that is absolutely wonderful news, my mother said with obvious relief flooding her voice. We have all been so worried about your situation. I noticed several faces visibly relax around the room. They had arrived expecting either another request for financial assistance or perhaps some kind of intervention about my spending habits and career choices. Instead, they were receiving positive news that required nothing from them personally. So why create all the drama about needing money? My father asked, his tone accusatory and sharp. Why approach everyone for help if you had a job opportunity lined up? I met his gaze steadily, no longer intimidated by his judgment. The job offer came through very recently, and when I was genuinely worried about my future, I reached out to my family for support. That is what family is supposed to provide, correct? An uncomfortable silence settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Well, we all have our own financial obligations and commitments, Bambi said defensively. It is not always possible to help even when we might want to. Of course, I agreed calmly. We all must make choices about our priorities and what matters most to us. I turned to focus on Kieran directly. Speaking of priorities, Kieran, I noticed you never responded to my messages when I needed help. Yet you had no difficulty asking me for $4,000 last fall for your dog food startup. He had the minimal grace to look embarrassed. I was dealing with some personal stuff and legitimately did not have any money available to give you. You did not even return my phone calls, I pointed out evenly. That would have cost nothing but time. The meeting continued in this vein for nearly an hour, with me calmly but firmly addressing each person's hypocrisy and absence of support when I had needed them most. No one admitted wrongdoing or took responsibility. Instead, there were elaborate excuses, creative justifications, and even some attempts to redirect blame back to me for making everyone feel guilty about their choices. Uncle Blaine was particularly defensive. You cannot expect people to drop everything and rescue you from poor planning, Lila. This is exactly why I always stress the importance of emergency funds and career diversification. Like the emergency fund I used to help you when your firm had cash flow problems? I asked quietly. His face reddened, but he said nothing. As family members filed out after an uncomfortable and tense hour, making vague promises to stay in better touch and celebrate my new job soon, I felt a strange sense of closure settling over me. I had not revealed the lottery win, but I had finally stood up for myself in ways I never had before. The money had given me something perhaps more valuable than wealth itself, the courage to see my relationships clearly and establish boundaries without fear of abandonment or disapproval. Prudence remained behind after everyone left, helping me clean up coffee cups and the remnants of awkward conversation. You handled that beautifully, she said quietly. That could not have been easy to confront them so directly. It was actually easier than I anticipated, I replied honestly. For the first time, I was not afraid of disappointing them because I finally realized their opinion of me was never based on who I really am. Prudence smiled with pride. That is a powerful and liberating realization. So what happens next in your life? Next, I said, we start looking at houses. For both of us. 1 year later, my life was unrecognizable from the day I had first discovered those life-changing lottery numbers. I had moved into a beautiful but tasteful home in a quiet neighborhood with a large backyard perfect for fostering rescue animals. Just 4 blocks away sat Prudence's new house, a single-story craftsman with wide doorways and accessible features to accommodate her mobility needs on difficult days. My non-profit organization, Second Chance Animal Foundation, had exceeded every expectation I had dared to have. We provided free emergency veterinary care, sponsored pet adoption fees, and offered temporary fostering for animals whose owners faced hospitalization or housing crises. In our first year, we had helped over 800 animals and their families, employing a staff of 12 veterinarians, technicians, and support workers. The work fulfilled me in ways my previous job never could. Every day brought stories of reunited families, saved lives, and second chances that would not have existed without our intervention. We had created a model that other cities were beginning to replicate, turning my secret charity work into a movement. Raven had eventually joined the organization as our medical director, bringing her emergency medicine expertise and natural compassion to our mission. She and I maintained our weekly wine tradition, though now it took place on my comfortable patio rather than squeezed into my cramped studio apartment. My relationship with my immediate family had evolved into something more distant but significantly more honest. I maintained polite, occasional contact with most of them through birthday calls and holiday gatherings, but the pretense of deep emotional connection had dissolved completely. Without expectations of intimacy that had never actually existed, our interactions became less painful and more straightforward. None of them knew about my lottery winnings. As far as they understood, I had simply found success in non-profit management, possibly supported by wealthy donors who appreciated my animal welfare work. They seemed to accept this explanation without curiosity about specific details, which revealed everything about their actual interest in my life. There had been moments of temptation to reveal the truth, particularly when Kieran called requesting money for yet another business venture, or when Skylar complained about the cost of their kitchen renovation project. But each time I remembered the silence when I had genuinely needed help, and the choice became clear and easy. Interestingly, there had been occasions when family members faced legitimate emergencies. When my father experienced a minor heart attack and faced unexpected medical bills, I anonymously covered them through the hospital's financial assistance program. When cousin Jasper finally entered rehabilitation for his drug addiction, I made an anonymous donation covering his treatment costs completely. They never discovered the source of these gifts, and I strongly preferred it that way. Helping them without recognition or gratitude was far more satisfying than the complicated emotional transactions that had characterized our previous relationships. Prudence and I shared dinner together at least 3 times each week, alternating between our houses. Her health had improved dramatically with access to better medical care and reduced financial stress. She had retired from her library volunteer work but now helped at our foundation's reading program, where children read to anxious shelter animals, calming both species simultaneously. "You know what continues to amaze me," she said one evening as we sat on her front porch, watching the neighborhood cats navigate their evening routines. "How differently everything could have unfolded if you had announced your lottery win immediately." I nodded, considering this alternate reality regularly. The family would have suddenly become incredibly attentive and loving, I imagine. "And you would never have known what was authentic," Prudence added thoughtfully. "That knowledge, painful as it was to acquire, gave you genuine freedom to choose your relationships consciously." She was absolutely correct. The experiment had been emotionally difficult but profoundly illuminating. It had shown me who deserved a permanent place in my life and who did not. More importantly, it had revealed the true nature of relationships I had spent years trying to strengthen despite their fundamental imbalance and dysfunction. The greatest lesson had been about my own character and values. Before the lottery, I had defined my worth entirely by what I could give to others, constantly attempting to earn love through sacrifice and financial generosity. I had allowed myself to be used repeatedly because I believed that was what family meant, what love required from me. Now I understood that genuine love, the kind Prudence demonstrated consistently, does not maintain balance sheets or keep score. It gives freely without expectation of return, but it also respects boundaries and individual dignity. It remains honest and consistent, present during good times and bad, without conditions or manipulation. I had initially kept my lottery win secret out of fear that money would corrupt my existing relationships. What I had not anticipated was how the secret would clarify them instead, stripping away pretense and revealing fundamental truths about people's character and motivations. 6 months after my family meeting, something unexpected happened. Kieran called me, but this time his voice carried a different quality than his usual schemes and requests. "Lila, I need to apologize," he said without preamble. I have been thinking about what you said during that family gathering, about how I never even returned your calls when you needed help. I was silent, surprised by this departure from his normal pattern. I started going to therapy, trying to understand why I keep sabotaging relationships and burning bridges with people who care about me. And I realized something horrible about myself. His voice cracked slightly. I have never actually been there for you, have I? Not once. I only contact you when I need something. Kieran. No, let me finish. I want to make this right somehow. I know I owe you thousands of dollars from over the years, money you gave me when you could not afford it. I want to pay that back, with interest. It might take time, but I will do it. Over the following months, Kieran proved his sincerity through consistent actions rather than promises. He found steady employment at a sustainable energy company, moved into a modest apartment he could actually afford, and began sending me small payments toward his debt every month. More importantly, he started calling regularly just to check on me, asking about my work and life without wanting anything in return. Eventually, I decided to trust him with my secret. His response was everything I could have hoped for: amazement, genuine happiness for my good fortune, and zero requests for money or favors. Instead, he offered to volunteer at the foundation, using his marketing skills to help expand our reach. My life now was rich in ways that transcended my bank account balance. I had discovered purpose through my foundation work, authentic connection with Prudence, Raven, and eventually Kieran, and a hard-earned understanding of my own worth that no external validation could shake or diminish. Perhaps most importantly, I had achieved genuine peace. The constant financial anxiety that had been my lifelong companion had disappeared, but so had my desperate need for approval from people incapable of providing authentic love. I had built a life aligned with my deepest values rather than my insecurities and fears. The money had certainly changed my circumstances, but not in the ways I had initially feared or hoped. It had simply provided the freedom to see clearly and choose wisely about relationships, work, and how to spend my time on earth. Prudence reached over and patted my hand, bringing me back to the present moment as we sat on her porch watching sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. You did something remarkable, kiddo. Not just with the money itself, but with what you learned about yourself and what you chose to do with that knowledge. I smiled at her, overwhelmed with gratitude for this woman who had demonstrated what family truly means. I had an excellent teacher. As darkness settled over our quiet neighborhood, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here, from the shock of matching numbers to the pain of family rejection to the joy of creating something meaningful with unexpected fortune. The money had transformed my life, but not in ways I had initially imagined or feared. It had given me freedom to see relationships clearly, choose consciously, and act from abundance rather than scarcity or fear. The most valuable discovery had nothing to do with millions sitting in investment accounts. It was understanding that the people who deserve permanent places in your life are not those who appear when you have everything to offer, but those who remain present when you have nothing to give except yourself. Looking back now, I realize my grandmother Eleanor would have been proud. Not just of the financial windfall, but of how I used it to discover truth, help others, and build authentic relationships based on genuine care rather than transaction or obligation. Have you ever had to test someone's loyalty during a personal crisis? What did that experience teach you about human nature and family bonds? Share your stories in the comments below, and let me know what you would do if you suddenly came into life-changing money but nobody knew about it. If this story resonated with your own family experiences, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real-life lessons about wealth, relationships, and discovering who truly matters in your life. Remember to share this video with someone who might need to hear that their worth is never determined by what they can give to others. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you find the clarity to recognize the authentic relationships in your own life, regardless of your financial circumstances.